Your lavender is dying from too much water. Not too little, too much. And here's the crazy part. The soil on top can look bone dry while the roots underneath are basically drowning. Quick question before we go further. Is your lavender planted beside a sidewalk, against the house, or out in the open? Keep that answer in your head because it matters in a minute. If you've killed lavender before, don't feel embarrassed. Almost everyone makes this mistake, and most gardeners blame themselves when the truth is the advice they've been given is usually wrong. Subscribe now, because we're about to break down the hidden reaction turning your soil into concrete and a 1-inch mistake that kills lavender within 18 months. Quick one before we dive in. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Let's start with where this plant actually comes from. Lavender grew up on dry, rocky Mediterranean hillsides, barely any rain, fast-draining soil, full sun all day. That's its comfort zone. Now picture the average backyard. Rich compost, soft, moisture-holding soil, mulch piled around the base to help retain water. Every one of those things is the opposite of what this plant evolved for. Here's the part almost nobody knows. There's a soil-dwelling organism called Phytophthora, and it's not even really a fungus. Think of it like a microscopic swimmer. The moment soil stays wet, even briefly, these things literally swim toward plant roots and infect them within hours. One single overwatering event. That's all it takes. Here's how you'll know it's already happened. Leaves turn a dull grayish color, roots underneath turn black and mushy, and if you tug the bark near the base of the stem, it slips right off like wet paper. If you've ever pulled up a dead lavender plant and the stem looked almost peeled, that wasn't old age. That was an infection. But wait, this isn't just a backyard problem. At the Sequim Lavender Festival in Washington State, researchers found that foot traffic itself spreads this disease. Shoes carry contaminated soil from one field straight into a healthy one. That's why serious growers now build raised boardwalks and keep potted plants up off the ground. If professional farms defend against people's shoes, that tells you how aggressive this organism is. How many lavender plants have you already lost? All right, moisture and infection, that's half the story. Here's the mistake almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most surprising thing in this whole video. Have you ever mixed sand into clay soil because someone told you it would loosen things up? If you have, comment ME, because I need to stop you right there. Picture a bin completely full of beach balls, big gaps of air between them. Now dump a few thousand marbles into that same bin. The marbles sink down and fill every single gap until there's no open space left at all. That's what fine sand does inside clay soil. It fills every microscopic gap between clay particles, and when that mixture gets wet and dries out, it hardens into something that behaves almost exactly like concrete. Airless. Dense. Nearly impossible for roots to push through. Horticulturists call it the concrete aggregation effect, and it's one of the most common invisible killers in home gardens because it looks like an improvement while it's actually sealing the soil shut. The fix is simple. Coarse material, not fine material. Horticultural grit, pumice or coarse builder's sand create gaps that actually stay open. Simple test. If the sand feels smooth like beach sand, don't use it. If it feels chunky like small gravel, that's the one that works. Here's another twist most people don't expect. Not all lavender is the same plant, even though garden centers slap the same label on all of it. Are you growing lavender in the ground or in a pot? Comment ground or pot because it actually changes which variety you should be looking for. English lavender survives brutal cold down to -10 degrees, but it hates humidity and poor drainage. French hybrid lavender, sometimes called lavandine, is bigger and tougher, and certain varieties handle both heat and humidity, making them the safer pick if you live somewhere hot and sticky. Spanish lavender has little rabbit ear-shaped petals on top, tolerates humidity and slightly acidic soil far better, but it cannot survive a serious hard freeze. So if you planted a cold, hardy variety somewhere hot and humid, or a heat-loving variety somewhere with brutal winters, the plant was working against its own genetics from day one. That's a mismatch nobody warned you about. Now here's the mistake, responsible for a shocking number of lavender deaths, and it happens before the plant is even in the ground. It's called the root flare, the spot where roots widen into the base of the stem, kind of like the flare at the bottom of a tree trunk. Bury that flare under even 1 inch of soil and moisture gets trapped against bark that was never built to handle it. That becomes the exact entry point for the same rot we already talked about. A study tracked over 1,000 newly transplanted plants across several US cities. More than 2/3 of the ones buried just 1 inch too deep developed serious rot within 18 months. 1 inch. That's the difference between a decade of blooms and a dead plant before its second birthday. The fix: before you plant, brush away the top inch or two of nursery soil to actually find that root flare. Dig your hole only as deep as that flare, but 2 to 3 times wider, so roots can spread sideways into the native soil. So let's put this together, because now you can actually diagnose your own plant instead of guessing. Lower leaves yellowing and soil staying damp for days? That's early root suffocation. Stop watering and check the roots. Black, slimy roots or bark that peels away easily? That's an active infection, and that plant needs to come out before it spreads. Stretching, pale and barely flowering? Not enough direct sun, full stop. Going forward, 3 habits fix almost all of this. Water at the base, never overhead. Only water when the soil at the drip line is dry and dusty, not on a schedule. And if your yard doesn't slope for drainage, a raised bed with a gritty mix solves it before it starts. Lavender isn't actually fragile. In its natural environment, it survives brutal sun, poor soil and drought without complaint. It struggles in backyards because of a few specific, fixable mistakes hiding in soil that looks perfectly fine on the surface. If this video saves even 1 lavender plant in your yard, hit like so. YouTube shows it to another gardener before they make the same mistake. Comment: which mistake surprised you most? The concrete sand trick, the root flare depth, or the fact that your soil could be soaked underneath while looking bone dry on top? And subscribe, because there's a lot more hiding under the surface of your garden than you'd think.